and or. Can you say a little bit about that, Kate?
Sure. Sometimes it helps to. I'm not going to be out of the camera for a minute.
Okay,
the
no.
camera's all for the online class. We'll see if it works. But it might be easier if I draw it.
Okay.
Here.
Oh yes, we're out of the camera for sure.
Wow, it's so fascinating.
Feel sorry for the online class.
Okay, so a lot of times when people try and explain this, they use Venn diagrams. So if I am looking for, if we take the beginning example, we have TV, teens, and we have violence. If I put an and, so I want all three of those components to be represented in the results that I get. I'm going to get this body of literature that's right here in the middle, right? I'm not going to get the stuff that just talks about violence and doesn't address these other two components. If I were going to do, let's say I wanted, sorry, this is really small for some people, you know, TV or television. You know, I'm going to get both of those, right? So if I put an or, I'm going to get all of this. I'm not sure if that's helping. So you just, when you're putting an and, you're making sure that each of the anded items is representing in the literature that you find or the results that you find. And when you're doing the or, it's broader because you're saying any of these is acceptable.
And so across the top where you have TV or television, you're just using synonyms, so it could be
Right.
either or.
Right.
And you wouldn't want and because they might not call it both. So you want to capture both.
Right. And I mean, we could start just with, right, TV, violence, and adolescence. We could just do that. But we're trying to make it a little broader when we start because we're not sure exactly what's there. We don't know what terms they're using, so we're just making it broader. Because it's best to start broad and then focus, and then narrow in. So did everyone get a chance to break these down? Does someone want to tell us what they did for the first one? And you probably noticed this, but you don't, you know, each research question is not necessarily going to have 3 concepts or 4 concepts, or it's going to vary by the question how many different concepts there are. So for what types of classroom activities for teaching mathematics address multiple intelligences, what would you try and use?
Well, for classroom activities, we also search for behaviors, actions, and then for mathematics, math, arithmetic, and then multiple intelligences, also logical mathematical intelligence and algorithms.
Okay.
I want to broke down those 3.
Okay, and then again, you would use the and between each of those sections. Okay. Were there other terms that people came up with?
For classroom activities, you could have lesson plans for teaching.
Great, yeah, so there might be a different way to represent classroom activities. It might be something like lesson plans. All right, what about the second one? Resistance training strategies that work for water sports. Well, in this instance, there's really just 2 main components, the resistance training and the water sports. You don't really have to represent work because you can assume that if those 2 concepts are mentioned in an article, it's going to talk about the relationship between the 2. And so resistance training, if you knew, I'm sure some of you do, different types of resistance training, those could be the synonyms. And with water sports as well, you could break it down into water sports.
What are synonyms for resistance training?
I don't know.
Like
I
strength
don't know
training?
enough about resistance training to know.
Weight training?
weightlifting.
And muscular development.
And what about the third question? So what types of substance abuse prevention programs exist for adolescents in urban areas?
Well, for adolescents, you could list all the ones that you've already listed.
Sure.
And then you could have drug abuse, substance abuse, prevention, interventions. Urban areas could also be cities, inner cities.
Sure, so I think you get the idea. And in that one, there were 4 components, right? So we had the substance abuse, we had some type of preventative program, we had an age group we were focusing on, and then we also had a geographic area. I think you get that. The next thing I wanted to talk a little bit about is just how do you revise or refine your search based on the number of search results you get. So if you search and you have 1,000 results, what are some of the strategies you can use to focus your results? And then if the opposite happens, if you don't find anything, how are you going to broaden your search? So before we do that, I'm just going to run this search. So I've got my words in, my search terms that I think are best.
And you're not putting any parameters around dates or?
Right, so I didn't put, there's all these different options here within psych info. And we call these limiting options. And dependent on the resource you're searching, there's going to be different limiting options. So for example, in ERIC, you're not going to see all of these. The same with like PubMed, you're not going to see all of these. It's going to be different dependent on the subject area. So for psychology, we have certain methods we could look at. We have publication types, language, population. So are you doing animals or people? And are you focusing inpatient, outpatient? So there's a lot of different things that you could use to focus your search. And they also have specific age groups. So if you want to use adolescents, you need to know that in this database, it specifically means 13 to 17-year-olds. So if you're all interested in, 18-year-olds, it's not going to be in the adolescence area, right? So you just need to pay attention to how the database is describing different terms. So I'm just going to leave it with this and run the search. And we're just going to have that there because it might give you some ideas of how you would change your search based on when you first see your initial results. So I have 160 results for my search. What are some of the things that I can do if I want to try and focus that search further?
Get rid of the books.
Pardon me?
I might want to only look at journal articles.
Sure. So
So-
right away, then I'm going to narrow my search, right? And I've got 97 journals or 86 peer-reviewed journals. So peer-reviewed, I think you all know what that is, right?
Do you all know what that is?
See, lots of yeses.
I think they use different terminology for the, didn't they? Just that it's considered more academic or.
Yeah, what happens is in a particular content area, the peer-reviewed journals, when you submit as a researcher an article for, for publication, it goes through an evaluation process, and each journal uses a number of peer reviewers who are experts in that particular content area, and they send your article out for what's called blind review typically. So they take off any identifiers so that in case someone knows you in the field, they don't want to bias their opinion of, well, if that came from Luke, it's definitely in. You thought I was going to say out, didn't you? So, and typically 3 or 4 published experts read it and recommend either publish or publish with revisions, and they suggest specific revisions to the original authors of the study, or don't publish, and they give reasons why. And then the journal editor collects those reviews and makes a decision based on that information.